Welcome to Silly Wales. This is a mental health podcast, and this show is for everyone, but it might not be for you because we discuss things such as mental health, because it's the whole thing, mental health podcast and all that stuff. Depression, suicidal feelings, and all that stuff. So if you're not about that, it is okay. There's some links in the description as well as you go to another podcast or YouTube video or whatever. We've made some changes. Like what you say? Well, just like this. This is mental health this week. Hey, there should be some cool music there. Hope you guys heard it. Hope it is good music too, you know? This is a segment where we discuss news stories or things to do with the week of mental health and our opinions and things like that on them. We might catch up to some things you didn't really know. Guys, welcome to mental health this week. Joe, what you got for us?
Hello, Alex. Hello. So we're having to catch up a lot. There's a lot of stuff that's happened more recently. Do you know there's a bill in the UK currently sort of in the motion? It's not that far along. I mean it's like partway through Commons. It's called the Terminally Ill in brackets End of Life close bracket bill, which is essentially a sort of assisted. It's specifically called assisted death. It's not called assisted suicide, sort of like relatively speaking, because it's about terminal illness. And it's basically about giving people the opportunity to end their life sooner when in terminal cases, which I think is quite a unique situation and actually has, like we were sort of discussing before the podcast, kind of has it's sort of divided even amongst the parties, although I'm actually not quite sure whether one side is more than the other, but it seems pretty nonpartisan. How do you feel about this in general? Like, I think I know your opinion, but I just want like to get a sort of a standard for sort of what the expression of our sense is for this sort of topic in general.
Like, if you want to die, you should be able to die. And that sounds really blunt, right? But the reality is that we have agency to make choices. And when it comes to terminal illness, especially in Western cultures and Western world, we have a very weird view of them, as if sort of antiquated in the fact that we can't decide how we want to end our own lives. Like, I've seen multiple like cases of people discussing in their wills what they want to happen, and it's very morbid time in general. Right. People are living in pain, and the pain is there every single day. They go to sleep in pain, they wake up in pain, they can't sleep due to pain, and they have a right to make a choice of no longer going to be in pain. And we should be able to respect it and actually care for it, rather than going, no, you can't just give up. Well, to put it bluntly, you're not giving up. Like, your body's kind of made that choice for you. So where are we at now, where we're making choices for people and their own bodies that they should be able to make for themselves?
I 100% agree. I think as well, like to kind of add to this discussion, if hopefully the bill itself will be within the description and so on in the link. If you actually look at the bill, you don't necessarily have to look at all of it, but if you look into like the kind of process by which this is happening, there's a lot of steps involved, and, it requires like the coordinating doctor, an independent doctor, and then like a further set of sort of reviews afterwards. This is like the most toe in the water kind of version of this idea, right? And I mean, we're talking about terminal illness, for example. We haven't even gotten into areas that some other countries have, and also areas where this is, I think, a much more scary, well, maybe not scary, but a more controversial topic, right? Like, I think if we then started talking about things like assisted suicide, I think people would have slightly different opinions when thinking about, I forget, I apologize, I don't remember the exact person's name or anything like that. But I remember within at least like about 10 years ago, I think, of the story of someone who was incredibly young, wanting to commit suicide and being able to do so assisted, right? And the kind of news, I don't know if outrage is the right word, but the news like noise around it, right? and I think there was even, I think it was discussed on American media. It's a troubling subject, I think, because we don't want to admit that, like, we should in theory have the option available to us, the idea that we have the right to, and also the idea that ultimately we can feel so bad that we want to do it. There's sort of this like weird notion around suicide, I think. Suicide, like, to be clear, because you can really go into different spaces. In certain areas, when we talk about suicide, people talk about it like a disease. Like, you know, talking about like in the way that we talk about like depression and stuff like that. And there's like really mixed messaging, I think, when we start talking about this. And I think it's because genuinely there isn't a ton of like philosophical process necessarily in terms of how some of this is discussed. But at the same time, I truly don't know, from my personal experience anyway, how I feel knowing that, like, if I had reached a point, I mean, I've discussed before that there are times I think to myself that I wouldn't have been here had things not turned out better for me, that I wouldn't be speaking now and all of this wouldn't have happened. But that didn't happen because I was in a position where I was able to get better, right? Like, things happened that made me feel better. But I guess the question is, let's say that for whatever reason, I was a different person and I had the proclivity or decision that I really wanted to end up like committing suicide or whatever. And there's a real question of, okay, well, we don't condemn people. It's not illegal to commit suicide, but from I think most people's like personal perspectives, someone committing suicide is a tragedy. And I can understand entirely where that comes from, especially, you know, I was young at the time. There's no doubt about this. It's difficult in my own mind to imagine whether I would stop myself or not, given a situation. Because the problem is that it's so difficult to understand what someone's going through internally. But then there's a whole load of discussions about how but ultimately I should be clear about this because we need to be responsible when talking about this. In no way do I think, or do I condone or believe that people should be considering suicide in general. I think people should avoid it as much as possible. I think people should seek help when these things come up. That's not because I condemn you for feeling the way you do, or I would condemn you if you did go through with it. But I want to recognize that just because I don't necessarily think something is a bad thing doesn't mean that I want people to go out and do it, because I truly do, especially from my perspective, understand that things can get better. And it's a very scary thing and I mean, I'm actually worse at this for this particular subject, but we have known people who have committed suicide or people who have attempted to. And it's really disconcerting or scary, to say the least, every time it comes up when you know someone and you are aware that suicidal ideation or thoughts are entering into their worldview. I mean, for me, it felt normal at a certain point, but like hearing about someone else engaging with it really does like light a fire in me. That's, you know, that is fearful and really want someone to find. Truly, it's just in the end, it's the desire that you want someone to find to live the best life they possibly can and so on. But again, it doesn't really. But possibly at the end of this rant, we have to recognize that people should have this decision, and taking away that right or decision is probably one of the most problematic things at a moral level that I don't know if I can cross. And again, this is a bill. Read into it. Again, this is like probably the simplest form of this idea. This isn't like entirely the idea of assisted suicide at a larger scale. And even the example I gave, which unfortunately I can't cite right now, of that person, they were in a medical state where they were experiencing great pain and things like that. I don't believe it was terminal in the sense of like they were going to die, but they were going to have to live their life that way, and they had severe depression and things like that. It's this has not come up in the conversation as much as I almost expected it would, possibly because this is so scary to talk about for a lot of people. And I just want to make that clear. And this is but this is a topic that is going to become more and more relevant as I think the idea of personal autonomy becomes much more recognizable amongst mental health specifically, and how we deal with mental health and how we engage with mental health and in supporting people, and for example, and so on, because we have to get away from certain narratives that kind of paint the person as like a sort of robot that doesn't know how to look after themselves, but also someone who needs intervention. Like there's a very difficult way of like sort of recognize. It's a very like difficult line. Is what I'm trying to say. And I mean, we still haven't found the answer. So I just want that to be part of the conversation anyway. Yeah, sorry, a little bit of a long one there, but
No,
I think this is a subject I've thought about quite a lot and don't have an answer yet, which says quite a lot because I, generally feel like I have opinions.
In terms of like even the case of mental health, right, as a reason for assisted dying, and then in the Netherlands, there's like a woman in her, she hadn't even turned 30 yet. She chose that route, went the whole legal route. I think it took her 3 years. I'll post the link to the article in the description. And she took her own life by proxy of her mental health. And there was a big whole, it shouldn't be used for this. We shouldn't let someone who has like a mental health condition take their own life. If you are in so much agony and generalized despair and suffering for the course of 3 years plus, and nothing has been done nothing that can be done to get rid of that feeling, then I think we have to start looking at that as an actual reasoning. Because the idea of mental health, a lot of people think, oh, she's just suicidal. But there's multiple conditions that can happen in which you're suffering to feel suicidal. It is crazy how we forget how detrimental mental illness can be. We view somebody as suffering if they have a physical impairment, for example. We can relate to that and we can go, oh yeah, then look at how this disease is killing them. The same thing applies to mental illness. Look at how this disease is killing them. It's not like some people don't just become anxious in life by circumstance. They become anxious in life because they're born that way. It's a very realistic thing for people to go through. So it'll be interesting to see how understanding people are. And we can really tell who isn't going to be understanding. If you look at who votes against this, Kemi Badenoch, the dickhead who says lunch or sandwiches are for wimps. Of course, she's vehemently against it. But you look at Rishi Sunak, and can't believe I'm going to say this, he's the more progressive of the two, clearly, as he's voted in favor of this. Same with Keir Starmer. Diane Abbott, Labour MP, veteran Labour MP, again, has said, that there's concerns over how it's going to be implemented because people feel like they should commit suicide because they are burdened to their family. Again, wild swing there to assume that that's going to be like a thing that happens straight away. The process for it, by all accounts, is very exhaustive within itself. Like, rightfully so. You are literally going to end your own life here. Like, the process should be pretty difficult to go through because it takes a lot of things to sort out, So I don't want there to be assumptions around it of like people being pressured into doing it. It's a lot, man. That's a lot.
Yeah. We want to try and be clear about what this bill is, because bills have been definitely misconstrued in the past. I can't imagine anyone famous right now based on that. But this is specifically about people with terminal illnesses and nothing to do with like, in a very medical sense, this is like, it could not be more, it could not be like more formal about how it's being done. So yeah. important thing, please give it you don't have to give it a full read, but give it like a skim just so you have like an idea of what this kind of thing is, whether or not it ends up going through. But I think that as a dialogue, it's something that you might see come up if it ends up going through the Houses of Parliament. So, so maybe later on you'll have more of an, not an investment, you'll have more of an idea of what this is about, like when you get to it.
Yeah. All right. What's the next one?
RF motherfucking Kennedy. He's a guy. He's a guy. Robert F. Kennedy. I don't know if you've heard of it. They're like a health guy, right? Health guy.
He's a health and safety aficionado.
Yes, the most health and safety aficionado of all.
Yeah, he is extremely centric towards health and loves preventing illnesses.
Oh boy,
Jesus Christ!
So, I did a little bit of research in this specific area, like to look at some of the things he said. Like, there's a kind of like main points he said about vaccines, about fluoridization of water, about God, there was something else. I'll get around to it.
By the way, just for reference, because I realized we've changed roles slightly here. You normally come in with for clarification, this is who this person is.
You do it. You do it.
Robert F. Kennedy he did run for the presidential campaign. He pulled out and joined Donald Trump. Great human being who loves this fucking country, okay? He's a fucking patriot, don't you hear me? He is now pretty much the head of health and medical sciences of the United States. The official role is ridiculous, as he is the health secretary, which means he decides what happens to everyone's health and to their food safety as well. And he is a whack job who believes in multiple conspiracy theories. Yeah, that's that.
The other two major claims are around. One is to do with ultra-processed food. I don't quite have enough to go off there because it's like the most vague thing to talk about, and like I don't even know if it's basically there's so much like wrong information that it's not really. Making statements about like certain areas of food is honestly like quite poor. We just shouldn't make them. And then crazy like claims about COVID. Okay, so let's just be clear about one thing. I do not like these things, and it is very clear that I don't. But the reason I don't isn't just because I'm in disagreement about many of these things. It's about the fact that the amount of information that is being held to in order to push this agenda or like push these ideas. I shouldn't call them agendas. Let's be impartial for a second. The idea that like these thoughts about like, about vaccines and things like that and fluoridization of water and so on don't have anywhere near the amount of info or the amount of research or anywhere near the amount of like accepted scientific agreement on so much of on that they are made out to, right? And this is the biggest issue I have, is not so much that he has an opinion I don't like, but that his opinion is based solely on really on so little, and yet he chooses to like keep it going. Now, I will say specifically, because one of these is way more, like two of these in particular I know a bit more and can talk about, and one of those in particular is very important to me. This vaccine shit has got to stop. Like, the vaccine autism shit is I'm so done with talking about this subject or reading about this subject. I can't describe how long I have known about this. I have known about how bullshit this was before I knew I was autistic, okay? And there's one fucking thing that like started this all by Andrew Wakefield. It's not a thing. I'm going to recommend an article, a master's thesis called The Wakefield Phenomenon. There's more to it, but I think if you put The Wakefield Phenomenon, you'll probably get it, by Karen Boger. honestly, having read like some of it, I really enjoy what I've read, and I want to read the full thing. But it's basically kind of discussing it not only discusses this topic and about like the science illiteracy in use, and not just the science illiteracy, but actually like kind of the pushing of a anti-vax movement, and the fact of its resurgence later on, but also that but also talking about like the ideas that exist in society around autism. So that's one of the reasons I'm recommending it. If you want actual information on specifically about autism and vaccination, showing that these don't exist, believe me, there's a plethora. So I'm not going to give like loads of articles to you or whatever. Just look it up. The Wakefield, like Andrew Wakefield's like article barely even shows what he's concluding it shows. And I mean that, like, I think I even read something that essentially, that when it broke it down and I kind of looked back at it, I realized there actually isn't anything to show what it shows. It's an insignificant difference that he then uses to make a conclusion, that a control could easily show. So that's a big one. I just want to point that out. And I don't know if we'll end up kind of coming back round to this in a different way, maybe with presents or later on when we kind of go with more of these journal episodes. But there's so much around mental health and specific medical like diagnoses or whatever, like, you know, certain disorders or however you want to call them, that just have so much like prior like mythological information surrounding it that makes it so difficult to pierce discussion topics and actually have like a real discussion around these things. I don't want the infantilization of people with mental health. Okay, like we need to get past that. Again, please read the Wakefield Phenomenon, a rhetorical examination of the resurgence of the anti-vaccination movement in the 20th and 21st century. It's very good. On top of that, God, fluoride is fine. There eventually everything in water eventually kills you. This is just a thing. Like, I don't know why. Eventually, enough water in water will kill you, in the sense that if you drink enough water, you'll die. There are already kind of things. There is the potential that we could have too much fluoride in drinking water, but not in the way that he's described. Like, this is not considerably a thing. And the problem I want to be clear about is also that, because, you know, not to get too specific, I don't want to go too hard on this, because I recognize that some people will take my stances on some of these things and go, well, he didn't say that, he actually said, and then he's something quite vaguely in the realm of, and it's like, yes, you have to understand, if you're making claims like that in a position like he is in, you are already doing a disservice hugely. You shouldn't be talking about things that are not really any, like, don't talk about things where there isn't kind of a push towards actually looking into it. Like like with the vaccination stuff, for example, he's like, oh, I've been vaccinated, my children were vaccinated. I can't possibly, it's literally I have a friend who's black, like reference for like race against racism. Like, you can't call me racist, I have a friend who's black. And it's like, okay, just understand like that he should not be in his position anyway, but he should not be in his position and talking about these things to dog whistle over people into the camp, or to dog whistle people into thinking that this is more and more reasonable. It's just not. And the fact of like him talking about fluoride in drinking water, for example, doesn't really give a lot of the problem is that missing out so many details, like this is science illiteracy, like in work as well, and like the problem of science literacy in terms of like its discussion. There's so many like things cut out of a set of like a statement, you know, like choosing to remove pieces in order to basically say fluoride in water can be bad and that's it, or fluoride in water is bad, from a statement of like fluoride above a certain amount will cause issues, because anything above a certain amount will generally cause issues because it's more of something than not. There are dosages to this, to everything. Obviously, medicine has dosages even. We recognize that. But somehow these kind of phrases are used specifically to avoid that. Yeah, glad I'm not in the US, honestly. But I know that we're going to have these discussions more and more in the UK. So,
yeah.
Luckily, I'm very lucky that I am generally happier right now in my life, because this would be really bothering me in a way that would mean I would just shut down and not like engage.
Like, funny enough, again, with these guys, I think RFK is not the worst out of all of them, to be honest.
No, he's just the figurehead.
I mean, I've like Trump's entire cabinet.
Oh, right, yeah.
Because this is a guy who is very pro to legalizing weed, despite I would say that goes against his party's general viewpoint as well, and also generally wants to open the doors to psychedelics use as treatment. I think the issues that we have, and I can recommend you to. I'll post that video too about Dr. Russell Barkley. There's not much to worry about in terms of ADHD medication and things like that. He has criticized Adderall before. Hopefully, he doesn't make it difficult to get. But right now, there's no suggestion that that's going to actually be a realistic thing. It's that he is just an overall idiot, and he's not really smart enough to really take on this position properly. And we've seen this before. We've seen people who are incompetent lead in big offices and struggle with it, i.e. Trump the first time round and Liz Truss. But, this is now a time where I think we need to very much look at the things that we're reading, the videos we're watching, and really try and understand everything that we're taking in and be able to verify that it's real and it's not fake. It's not misinformation. Especially now, we have a guy who will probably end up pushing dumb shit, be it accidentally and be it on purpose.
Well said.
Okay. Now it's time for the main event. Okay. Okay, it's time. It's time, okay? Our friend, our great friend, our loving homeboy, Stephen Bartlett, as per BBC, has been sharing harmful misinformation in Diary of a CEO podcast. Well, guys, who would have thought, Who would have thought that, the king of capitalism himself is sharing things that probably shouldn't be spoken of on a public, show. Long story short, he's on Dragon's Den as well, Stephen Bartlett. He has a podcast called Diary of a CEO. It's not a bad show. Well, the 2 episodes I've listened to, which is David Harewood and Ivan Toney. Pretty much a back and forth between really successful people in their respective fields. And it sounds all well and good until he's had on some health guys over the last 2 years maybe. And these guys have pretty much gone on there and said things such as, well, I actually quite like certain foods fuel cancer, and that things like anti-vaccine conspiracies along the lines of COVID was an engineered weapon.
Right.
Now, we live in a world where we just spoke about conspiracy theories earlier with Robert frickin' Kennedy. And we now have multiple podcasts preaching that same misinformation. For example, we have Joe Rogan, then we have Diary of a CEO, and then we have, insert right-wing conspiracy theorist cunt face podcast here, InfoWars, for example. So we now have a sphere of just misinformation. So evidence-based things are being put to a side because we're now hearing from people who are calling themselves doctors, who are actual doctors as well, publicly spewing misinformation. And the best thing about all of this is that I personally feel like if you are a creator of any sort of content which people watch, be it you're a television producer, you're a writer, you are the presenter, you are a host, you're a guest, you kind of have a responsibility to make sure what you're saying is, one, verifiable and backed, and two, you're able to differentiate when you're giving your opinion to when you actually talk about something fact-based. The issue with podcasts and even content like we're making here, which is, the show, where at the end of the day, we are just two bumbling idiots discussing shit.
Mm-hmm.
We still have a general responsibility to make sure that we don't say something as fact and we don't present it as fact, despite it possibly not being fact. For example, if I say that pigs can fly, I say, yeah, guys, I saw a pig fly in Guantanamo Bay once. Jesus, great. I speak to that as factual and people somewhere believe it. That is on me. I'm purposely spreading something that did not happen at all. So it's a responsibility. And even if you don't know something, we have to look and we have to read and pay attention to things. Now, the issue that we have with all of this is that, well, his response to it is pretty much akin to stepping on a Lego and stepping on a plug socket. No, it's a plug. No, it's a plug. As to quote, at the end of one of the episodes, one of the doctors who came on it said that the COVID vaccine was a net negative for society, despite, of course, it showing that it saved millions of people's lives. Mr. Bartlett, and I'm reading straight from this, said, the truth is usually somewhere in the middle. He added that ideas from the suffragettes, Gandhi, and Martin Luther King were also received equally horrifically. So we have to be humble that an idea that may be important may trigger us, but it can't be censored. Now, I personally feel like you should get kicked in the shin by a 12-year-old Thailand child for about 6 hours straight. Like, I mean, they look at you like you're a banana tree and they just start swinging. Because...
Is that a racist statement?
Absolutely not. But
sorry, was that too spicy? Sorry.
No. But the idea that, you can say that and you are comparing the dumb shit that you're peddling on your show with the voices of, pivotal people in history says a lot about not only the show you think you're making, but yourself as well. Now, guess what? Oh, I forgot this bit as well. The doctor who he had on, who debunked the whole COVID thing, then said that he accepts there's some people who disagree with his views, and he said that does not mean they've been debunked. My friend, they've been debunked multiple times, man. And we live in a stage of delusions of grandeur. But guess what? Having delusions of grandeur doesn't mean you can lie to people. So it is still on the host's shoulders to say, by the way, guys, this is possibly not seen as true, and you should look into it yourself at least. And we're amplifying a voice that might not be factual, but this is their opinion, and we're going to listen to it. That is the least he can do. But no, he puts himself in the fucking Louvre. He stands on a fucking podium with Jesse Owens, and he goes, look, I'm like Gandhi. What?
Don't silent me.
You're not being censored. You are not. I also don't feel like you are a right-wing grifter who claims censorship out of nowhere. I don't feel like that is a thing that Mr. Bartlett is all about. I would like to think he's far too intelligent for that. So I feel like this is his way of saying, hey guys, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing, but thanks for letting me know. That's me giving him the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah. The part that gets me the most, I think, is this a thing that's kind of been around for I think it's been around since I was a child, to be honest. It's pretty long. It's been a pretty long time that I've heard these kind of things. I think I remember Dara O'Brien doing a comedy, in one of his comedy tours or whatever. He was talking about this, the idea that on the even on the BBC at the time or whatever, or even in certain areas where this need to present the other side, justification for bringing in people who shouldn't who have been discredited and should not get credit for what they say. It's, or at the very least, posing them as an equivalent on some scale of two sides. Not everything in life needs to have a person who knows what they're talking about and saying something factual, which also may include opinions within it, not like as in, there are also opinions embedded. And then having someone who doesn't know what they're talking about, clearly is talking bollocks based upon all of the research we have, and then saying like whatever they want and presuming that somehow like something in the middle is the truth. Look, the thing I will admit to is that I believe that conversation, a dialectic, can produce like a sort of synthesis of, I'm just quoting philosophers now, but produce a synthesis of information that is new and is transformative and whatever. I do believe that we see that consistently occur in society with how culture is changing around social media, for example, and things like that, just at least in our recognition of it and things like that, in the way that I think when it was first coming up, we just did it. The problem I have is the assumption that somehow the middle is always this kind of like 50% between any 2 points. It's just not. If I give you, I'm trying to think of what's two like just really close together people in and from like some ideological perspective or like some opinion. Let's say I took like Jordan Peterson and Ben Shapiro, right? And I said, okay, well, we're going to have these two talk to each other. And somewhere in the middle between these two is correct. Well, personally, I would disagree with that. But it's absolutely ridiculous to assume that the middle is somehow existing within these two. Or that if you took like two people of completely opposite, mutually different points of view, that somehow the middle between them is going to be the correct, like the exact middle is where you're going to find things. No, we need to be a bit more. I'm coming at this with maybe a bit too forceful in energy. I feel like in general I am, because some of this is like triggering me, I guess. But I'm recognizing that there is this seeming sense that we have to show like extreme versions of ideas, and that these extreme versions of ideas that exist, are perfectly legitimate, and not only are they legitimate, but they need to be heard in conjunction with stuff that is not like an extreme take, that is like methodically worked out and so on. And when we're talking about science in particular, just to add, science, like there's been this like push more recently, I think, with I don't remember the guy's name again, but there have been I've seen different people talking about ideas and is pushing this idea of like, oh, why don't we have Einsteins anymore, and why don't we have like Newtons? Like, why don't we have these like great mathematicians and scientists of history and so on? Why don't we have these anymore? This is because of some attempt to like to reduce us. This is to be like, oh, this is all about this over push on equality and like all of this stuff. It's not true. The reason is because science has actually reached a point where we're past a lot of like certain fundamental elements that we've learned, and now the things we need in order to actually like understand and work out certain things is becoming more and more and more difficult to access without large groups of people working together. This is why you see et al. On almost every sort of research article or whatever. By the way, just to point out, Stephen Hawking existed, so I'm not quite sure what that guy was talking about. But never mind. Like, he had a fucking radiation named after it.
That there's no like strong presence of minds anymore. Like,
yeah,
there is. Like, yeah. There really is. You just don't see them because, again, like, I can guarantee 200 years from now, we're going to look back at, well, Stephen Hawking for one, but a list of pioneering scientists as well who have created different theories in this time frame. Like, we're not looking to them in the same way because they're not historical yet. That's why we're not looking at them properly in the exact same way. Like, it's really important that we well, we don't allow people to say back in my day or not in my backyard style comments about things that are gonna happen. We're just in the time of these people. Like, so we don't view them as like revered names yet because, well, they're only growing in notoriety now. Their names are
Yeah.
only being built now. They're still working on the shit that they're doing.
Yeah, we haven't seen the back and forth, but of disagreement. I mean, to be fair, like there's disagreements about the nature in physics around things like string theory and other sorts of things. And I mean, it's kind of being written currently until we kind of learn who's kind of right in the end, or which one is the best approximation. Because again, that's kind of how science works. Like we don't know how to adjust or set like who is kind of in the, like, who's the quote unquote genius or whatever. I hate all of that bullshit, by the way, but I because I think it's so I think it's problematic, and I think it actually causes a lot of issues in people, including myself. I recognize that. But like, I think there's this real desire to kind of push a narrative, and I want to point out that part of the reason I think that we're talking about this, and it feels so, at least for me anyway, I shouldn't speak for you. The reason why it feels so like such a big deal for me is because I just see how much I could have been someone who has been affected like by these kind of pieces of information, or by this kind of like rhetoric and things like that. Like, I recognize that I have been so often in my life in very vulnerable states, and that would have been possible, which is why the fact that I'm even in this position where I can talk about this sort of thing and not feel like I'm wrong, I should be more clear, that I feel like I actually have a body of evidence behind me that doesn't require like any sort of like narrative. It's just simply like, okay, this is what this is. The fact that there's a whole body of work and people who are all peer reviewing and checking one another over, and well, there's problems, I will say, in that there isn't enough peer reviewing currently, but this is an issue that many people in science are recognizing. This is actually a funding issue, to be clear. But in general, like what the body of science is doing is that it's constantly checking itself. It's constantly reviewing what people are thinking. It's constantly trying to break new boundaries, and in many ways, it's like it's a kind of like, it's a process and amalgam, like presence, right? Like of what it does, and the people within it are very much a part of the ocean of new. Of thought, right? And a significant difference, I think, between some of the people that you'll tend to see on podcasts and in other sorts of things where people are like railing and rebelling against like what the general narrative of science is versus like what actual like most scientists are saying, is that the people who are going off in these like rebellious directions, are these radical ideas, are very much using the fact that they are not a part of this like amalgamation, because people don't like the idea of an amalgamation of things like having authority or whatever. Like it's too mysterious, it's too confusing, it's too whatever. Understand that like it's not like there's no investment for any person really to go along with the general view. Like, in all honesty, like the people are making money off of appearances and so on by not going with the general view. So there really is no benefit, like specifically to doing that from if we're talking about like a grifting money making situation. So need to get like I just want to kind of point that out because I noticed that a lot, and I feel like, again, I recognize how vulnerable and I was, and I recognize how easily I could be swayed. I think nowadays I'm much better. Like I it's not that I'm stubborn. now. It's just that I'm much more likely to listen to something and not immediately jump to conclusions or immediately go along with what it says. That I'm much more media literate and much more like literate on like how to kind of control how I feel about things. And of course I feel better, so I'm less vulnerable in general. But like to be, but I recognize just how much I could have gone down a rabbit hole of, and I did go down a rabbit hole. Let's be honest, of topics, and I thank God I'm at the point I'm at now, because all of this is the reason I think this bothers me so much is that all of this is like just such a like wound. It's such a pressing like wound of like, oh, I remember that. I remember how this sort of thing could have made me like, just could have made me dumber.
Yeah, like you've made some big progressions. Like you are a far right Nazi, and now you're just a Nazi. So like, it's not. Look, I just want to highlight a scientist there. Gladys West, still alive. You can still give her flowers. Is 90 years old. The GPS, that was her shit. Like the thing that we used to get everywhere. Oh, I gotta get a CMAP up on my phone. Yeah, that was her. She did that. She did that for you. Okay. Like that is a scientist who, in I think 100 years' time, we're gonna be like, yeah, we had scientists like Gladys West and pioneers like her. So, and Lynn Evans, the guy who helped the main project leader of the like Hadron Collider, find the whole Higgs boson, all that stuff. He did that. He was the main project head for that. We're gonna hear his name as well. But they're here, and we only give people their flowers when they're dead. Like, but you can give them the flowers now if you care. So look into it. Have fun. Have fun. You'll be surprised the modern technologies that we use now, how recent the development and finding of the technology actually was. And then you'll be, this person did everything. Look at that. Can we move on?
We can move on.
Yeah, boy. Yeah. 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 It's time for the journal. This is old school City Wales. We discuss things in our week. Yeah, see, we didn't forget this bit. We didn't do it. We didn't just leave you. Like, I know you enjoy us randomly talking about our lives. I know you do. You feel like there's a connection there, and we feel it too. Okay, don't get parasocial on us though. Okay.
Oh, stop! That actually really, I hated all of what you just said.
I have to work really hard.
It was like I listened to ASMR and it like really fucking like put me the wrong way.
I had to work really hard for that one.
You did. You actually wormed into me. It was really weird. Yeah. So we sort of changed things a bit. We sort of have kind of flirted around with it, and then sort of impetus got like pushed us to it, and now we've kind of making a shift. Just felt at least okay. I genuinely like where this is going. It won't always in my head, by the way, like the whole like first kind of section, the mental health this week section, it isn't always just going to be like looking up an article and things like that. We sort of talked about this, but in my sort of head, like, you know, we're including like, you know, topics that we think are just like quite important or have been important to us lately, but isn't necessarily like much to talk about in terms of like, this has been my week. Like it didn't affect the week necessarily or something like that. Or maybe something happened in the week, but it's just a single event. And actually there's kind of more going on. And maybe we want to make this more of a discussion. So there's still going to be like back and forth elements and things like that within mental health this week. But yeah, this is like the pure, we mention like what we're going to maybe talk about, but we don't, but honestly, like might not even say all of the things we've discussed, we've put down or, this to me is like the improv bit in that way.
Yeah. This is old school.
Old school.
Yeah, I don't know, man. Changes are fun. We're now in season 2. Okay, so we're happy.
Season 2.
we're happy.
For those who don't know, Alex just like basically makes a TV series out of life in general, which
Everything.
everything,
any project I'm involved in, especially when it comes down to like creation of any sort, it works in seasons, and the seasons don't just end for no reason. They end the minute we've made a change. So we've now made a change. We changed the show. Season 2, boom, look at that. So we're in season 2 of Silly Whales. When will season 3 come? When, I don't know, when we do the show live in a W. Smith next to Weatherspoons. Fuck if I know, man. Like,
we just completely changed like how. I mean, like, I guess like a camera, for example, would be a change. Not that I'm like necessarily pushing for that, but as an example, I can imagine like uploading it that way and being like, season 3, look, we got a studio. Or, I don't know, some
Jesus
sort of
Christ,
nonsense. Man. That'd be crazy.
Anyway, I recall you talk about letting yourself off the leash. Joe, unleashed.
Yeah, I this is. I kind of never got round to it last week. This was one of those things where I talked about it with you and never actually like mentioned that I've sort of taken almost, or I've also taken like a sort of approach recently of essentially letting. I put down sort of letting myself off the leash because because it felt like that, or it felt like that's what I did, in the sense that I felt that I needed to do that consistently. I needed to keep myself in a very. Let me explain what any of this means. In social situations, and I've talked about this before, I felt like I was self-censoring a lot, and I felt like I was being very careful about how I was interacting with people, not necessarily because there was a good reason to. I've talked about kind of like the weird complex I had with other adults and people who are older than me, and why that's weird. And I've actually kind of learned over since then, like that, how to kind of push past that. But even like as a recent of, and that actually really helped, like kind of talking about this subject actually got me to sort of actively be a bit more trusting of how I interact with people, and not being so like vigilant about like how I act, and being like very careful, because it actually means a lot of the time that you don't get to enjoy the situation you're in, and it means that you also don't get to kind of express anything, because you are too end up being too robotic about about what I'm going to say. And there's so many opportunities that I missed, I think, because I was just thinking to myself, oh, what should I say or what should I not say? Whether it comes across in this episode and going forward, I don't know. Like, it has already happened, to be clear. Like, it's been more than a week, but this is just one of those things that I've, but maybe someone will notice. But like, even as much as like 2 months ago, I would still feel very, I would still end up being very cautious around how I interact and talked about things. And I just kind of decided I didn't want to do that anymore. It was, and this is one of the big things. I think that one of the reasons, I think it meant that like social and interaction became really exhausting. And I think we've chatted about this on the podcast as well, like that how exhausting interaction ends up being. And I think that not being so like kind of helicopter of myself, helicopter self-conscious of myself, means that I've don't spend so much energy like worrying consistently about these sorts of things. And that, to be fair, that has come from, I think, a genuine fear, but a very real one, which is that, hey, guess what? At certain points in my life, I wasn't that great. Like in certain situations, I wasn't like amazing to be around. I spoke very like kind of, I didn't have like the social development to recognize that I should speak a certain way. Beep beep. And whereas now, I right now as I am, like I recognize that I've had a lot of lessons, and I've put a lot of time into trying to understand how to communicate better, how to represent my feelings as best as possible. Sometimes I make a miss, but I generally understand how I should probably then fix it, like how I should kind of go from, oh, I missed explaining that well. Let me now take a second pass and let's do so without like causing any further offense. And I just and I admire like social interaction, and I find it very interesting, and I and understanding the rules and all of that. I'm not a huge fan of all of the rules, but understanding the rules enough so that I can represent myself assertively and yet not feel like I'm treading on everyone's toes constantly or just being an arse is I think a perfectly fine thing to do. So yeah, so just recently I've just been like, I've kind of turned a switch off, and it's funny. I can't believe it actually felt this way. It really did feel like I turned the switch off. Like it felt like I actually went boom and then just stopped thinking about it, which I think shows that it was there. Like at least in my head, I assumed I forget the word. I basically imagine that the fact that it felt that way means that at some level there was something there, like that. But I don't know. That could be just pure, like, purely hypocritical. But like, that's not how you use that word. Doesn't matter. Might be bullshit, is what I'm saying. But I did have this idea in my head that like, oh wait, I suddenly realized that it wasn't turning on anymore. Like it wasn't. I was like noticing like a flicker, and then it would go, and then it would die away, and there was just no more of that like part of my brain going, like having these like really inserted, like to really be like, oh no, hold on, stop. Like I'm now trusting myself is the main thing. If I can summarize this as best as possible, I'm trusting myself to play in the sandbox with everyone else socially and not be so like worried that I feel like I have to like be holding my hand the entire time going through any social interaction or whatever, and just being a little bit more like, yeah, you might be a little bit more boisterous, or you might be a little bit more some people might find you annoying, but some people might like you. And I mean, hey, and also I am a social person. I like interacting with people, and I feel like me being a social person has very recently been a good thing. So I wouldn't want to stop myself and make myself feel uncomfortable about wanting to interact with people. As I
so
have
you want
done.
to play in the pool?
I want to shit in the pool, Alex.
No, I thought the whole bit I was gonna do is like you want to play in the pool, but you just want to make sure you don't shit in it. Like
Oh, we had two different ideas. Sorry.
Same premise though, same setup. It's good. Season 2, look at that. See, yeah, man. Like I like it. I thought that you were pretty off the leash anyway. So now I'm expecting for this to be. I think off the leash is different because when you're with like myself, you're Kestis, whatever. It's more of a familiarity thing. But now off the leash in day-to-day situations, so it'll be interesting. Can't wait for you to have a wife and 6 kids by the end of the year.
Oh wow! Okay.
Yeah, I'm giving you 15 days.
15? Oh yeah, you're right. I always forget that. Whenever someone says the end of the year, I always just assume it's like January. I don't even think about that. Yeah. Okay. Well, it's gonna have to be someone at work. I think. I don't think I have too much time to go around. Well, we'll see. Maybe the 30th.
I have got a little to nothing, but I'm gonna make something up on the spot. Which means I do have a thing. I feel like pretty much I've been on this whole weight loss journey, things like that, and I make it sound like I'm the biggest loser some shit. I'm not. I'm just cutting weight so I can fight. and be relatively healthy. I can run faster and I can beat people up and beat myself up better. In the description of last episode, I've mentioned 3 pounds down. Haven't weighed myself this week. I'm gonna guess I've maintained or I've gained 1 pound. Why haven't I weighed myself this week? I don't weigh myself every week. I weigh myself every 2 weeks. And the amount of anxiety I get stepping on the scale is terrible. It literally I'm one stage of a trembling and being, I don't want to do this anymore. And 9 times out of 10, I step on the scale and I'm going to get a reading and be like, oh, okay. I'm going to step back off, and then I'm going to forget the reading anyway. So, effectively, I'm at a point now where the weighing in process is killing my enthusiasm for the weight loss itself. And that's a nice, fun little journey to have.
Ah.
Anyway, that's it. Anything else for you?
I was gonna say, like, I made a mental note, and of course, mental notes just fucking disappear from my brain to talk to you about this because I was like, oh, I remember you saying it, and then we didn't like continue it. So yeah, I'm glad you brought it up again because well, I'm not looking forward to it. I just want you to have as much fun with like using it as a way to maybe help you where possible, or at least like you did today, like just talk about your sort of anxiety around it if you feel comfortable or feel a benefit from doing so.
Yeah, it's a time, Joe.
It's time.
I'm so sorry, GRVP. Choo choo! Recommendation station. If one podcast dies, which is killing me inside slowly, then I'm going to revive Recommendation Station for Sealy Wales. I might change the name, but right now it's called Recommendation Station. We recommend shit. Joe, do you want to go first?
I was just going to say, I saw a cool video by a guy called Dark Matter 2525. I've looked over some of his other videos. I'm not like, I've only watched one video. I was just looking over the others to see like, oh, is this like one video good, but everything else is shite? I have no idea. Mostly, to be fair, he's mostly like kind of, it's mostly like a kind of guy that doesn't particularly like, religious people on quite a lot of occasions. I'm not necessarily like interested in a lot of that kind of content anymore. I had that phase when I was younger. I don't kind of need it as much. I mean, I'm not saying it's not reasonable, some of the takes he has. I'm just, pointing out that it's not my thing. But I really did like his video, Why I Stopped Being Anti-Woke. Genuinely, a very interesting video, not just because I think... it's not interesting in the sense that I learned necessarily a ton. I think it's far more the way he describes everything was useful to me in like making a bit more narrative sense about why people do things. And also I think that like if you're someone, whether you are I guess no matter who you are, but I think it's actually worth listening to because it's quite a good I just think it's quite a good like explanation essentially of how some of these things end up getting out of hand, why people end up going down pipelines politically, and also why people who genuinely feel like they're doing it for the right reasons can end up making big statement, can end up being on kind of like the wrong side of a debate and really getting angry at like whole groups of people for no reason. And I think it's interesting, like him going over it and his perspective, the perspective he has when describing it, I think was just really good. So yeah, it's just a little video I saw today. I tried to come up with something and I was like, oh, I need to find something. But I did want to come out with something for the first episode where we did it.
Yeah. I am running down the complete copying GRVP route. So I'm going to recommend Anthony Jeselnik's new special, Bones and All. I went to the tour, I went to the London show, and one of my favorite things to now do is I went to the comedy stand-up show by myself. I have now found a joy of going to things by myself. I was going to buy... This thing, because when I showed him to you the first time, you were like, I hate this. And I hated you for it, and I still do. So in 6 years' time, when we're doing the show, I'm going to randomly punch in the face for disliking Anthony Jeselnik, because that's what a true sycophantic fan does. I was going to be like, hey, Joe, do you want to come down like to London to see the show? And I was like, I still got to ask of Joe. Then I was going to ask another friend of mine, and I was like, she's going to annoy me throughout the whole show. And I realized to myself, I want to do this by myself. In the same way I saw Penn and Teller at the same place, the Inventim Apollo, I saw Bones and All by myself, and it was an hour or so of bliss. It was great. His special has now come out. It is on Netflix. Give it a watch, please. It will make you laugh, hopefully. And if it doesn't, then fuck you. How about that, okay? You dumb fucking... Who the fuck you think you're talking to right now, okay? You don't know who I am. Yeah.
Hey, I'm gonna watch it.
I was talking to the audience. I know you're gonna watch it.
Oh no, I know, but like you've made a recommendation. I'm gonna watch it now.
I will double leg takedown you and assault you and punch you in the face. I am Joaquin Buckley and you are Colby Covington. I am beating you up for no reason. Anyway.
Very good.
That was about 2.5 minutes of nonsense added on with the original 55 minutes of nonsense I've been spouting for this entire show. Guys, it's time. We're going to take 2 steps to the rear and get out of here. We're in the wind. Season 2, baby. See ya.
Damn it, I was literally going to say season 2, baby. Now you've taken it from me.
How's it feel? Fucking colonizer.